Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm TCaptainX. Today we're going to be discussing the best assault rifles, LMGs, and battle rifles, all to be used in Warzone Season 4. And this is going to be up to date after the DG58 nerf that just happened, because I was literally about to post this video, then they nerfed the DG, so I had to redo the whole video. Now to be doing this, we are going to be using our website, GGs.AI. That is GGs.AI. I would highly encourage you guys to check out this website for yourself. This is an AI-powered meta finder that takes in a ton of data and statistics from the game to statistically tell us what is the best loadout, and it ranks us on a score from 1 to 10 with tons of different loadouts here. So we are on the weapons page here. I've got this sorted for long range for today's video. I already posted my close range video just a few days ago. We're looking at ARs, battle rifles, and LMGs. Now you can also sort by different play styles here, and this will change how the algorithm scores it. So for Resurgence, which is kind of what we're focusing on today's video, the aggressive play style is really good to look at, especially for the long range meta, because it's going to factor in things like mobility, faster handling, and TTKs at a little bit closer ranges to be more important. If you're someone that you play Urzikstan more, balanced might be a better option for you to look at, specifically for long range. Casual really focuses on low recoil as being a big priority, and then tactical really focuses on longer range engagements, and that's why actually none of these are meta, but the Kar 98 is very meta in tactical. So again, for today's video, we're going to be focusing on the aggressive play style because it kind of fits for Resurgence, and let's kind of do a quick synopsis of what's the meta. So the top two, SVA 545 is specifically on the burst mode, and then the MTZ 556. These are hands down kind of the top two. You can easily make a case for either of these of being the number one. It kind of just depends, but we're going to get into that here in a moment. The BP50 also insanely good, but does have a few flaws. Taq Eradicator, very underrated LMG. The DG58 did get nerfed. Its mid to long range damage is not as good, so at longer ranges it's going to take additional shots to kill now. It's still a very good option though. And then there's also the Holger 26, which a lot of people are raving about, especially when it comes to big map. I think it's a very good option, but I don't think it's quite the best option, specifically when it comes to Resurgence. Several other options here: MCW, Taq Evolver, even the STB, even the Taq V is in here. Another one I'd point out, the Tempest Razorback actually does rank meta as well under casual. So there's a lot of other options. If you want to look at more of these builds yourself, again, I would encourage you to come to our website, GGs.AI. You can hit the drop down and look at multiple of these different builds. Now I will warn you guys, this website costs us a lot of money just to maintain and run, and because of that, some of these builds are going to be locked or kind of paywalled behind our subscription feature. It's $9 a month or $69 for the entire year to have full access to all of the builds, but still there are a lot of other builds that you're still going to be able to see if you are unable to pay for it. I totally understand that. Also, another really cool feature that does come with having the premium membership is you can add your own build, and then you can have it scored by our algorithm. So if you want to see how your build stacks up against ours, you could come here on the score my build. You can add, let's say we'll do the BP50. We'll go to the attachments. You would pick your attachments here. I'm just going to throw a super random build together just really quickly for the sake of it. This build probably won't be very good, but who knows? We'll find out here. So once we've added everything, you can name it. We'll just do BP50 test. We'll hit add loadout, and then it's going to add it here to our profile. You can then hit score build. Also, we're going to categorize this. This is going to be, we'll say, a long range build. We'll call it balanced, and we're going to hit analyze. This can take up to maybe like a minute at the longest or so, depending on if there's a lot of traffic. You can totally click off of this and come back to it when it's done though. All right, so it is done. It says this is up to date, and this rated as a D tier overall. You can also look at how it scores on the different algorithms though. You can look at more detailed stats here. We're going to be adding even more features here, but this is a very cool tool. And then if you go to the community builds, you can look at what everyone else is ranking. So you can sort by different guns here. You can look at what everyone else is ranking their guns as, and just a very cool tool that we're going to continue to build on and add more features to. All right, so I went ahead and added several of these builds to compare. So when you hit the drop down, there's going to be a button here that will say add to compare. So for example here, if I remove this one, you can hit compare details. If we scroll down here, now we can look at a lot more detailed stats, so we can start looking at the pros and cons of these guns. So I'm going to extend the range to about 75 meters here, and let's kind of look at the time to kill differences really quick of these guns. So number one, the BP50 in the green line has insanely good close range time to kills. In solos, the BP50 is probably hands down the best AR. Mid to long range, it is still quite solid as well. The one fatal flaw of the BP50 though, if we switch to the DPM chart, the damage per mag, it is way down here at the bottom because it has a very small magazine and it has a slow reload. So in solos, it's great. In trios and quads, it can really struggle though. Now, the MTZ-556 in the blue line is what I'm gonna personally rate as number one. Its close to mid-range TTKs are phenomenal. Up to 50 meters, basically nothing beats it besides the BP50 up close, but even at long range, it is still very, very dominant. The SVA-545 is what I'm gonna say is number two in the orange line here. Its time to kills are okay. They're nothing super impressive. At long range, they're pretty slow, but on the burst mode, this gun has literally no recoil. So my quick summary here is if you have average to below average recoil, the SVA-545 probably the better option for you as long as you're okay with shooting it in that burst mode. But if you have average to above average recoil, the MTZ-556 is probably the better option. Now, a few other guns to mention, the Taq Eradicator in purple you're going to see is also very, very competitive up to mid range. At long range, it's pretty solid as well. Has very good DPM as well. That purple line, huge magazine with it. DG58 after the nerf, you're going to see at long range, it really falls out. It used to be kind of right here in the mix with kind of one of the best long range TTKs. Now, not so much. It's still good, just not nearly as good as it used to be. And then the Holger 26 in yellow you're going to see is also extremely competitive at very, very long ranges. Again, I think the Holger 26 is better on big map, but it's still a solid option on Resurgence. Now, as we scroll down here, we have a ton more stats and info that you can really get into. This is a very, very powerful tool, the weighted expected time to kill. Basically, this takes in a ton of information and it says, what is the time to kill that you can most likely expect to get in most situations? And the MTZ-556 is by far the best one, which is why overall, I think it is the best gun for Resurgence. You can do things like add in the aim down sight speed time, and this does make guns like the Taq Eradicator and the Holger 26, those big LMGs, kind of fall back a little bit, and that's why that is an important stat to look at as well. There's plenty of more stats like damage output. This really shows where the BP50 struggles because on average with normal accuracies, you're only going to get about 1 down per magazine. MTZ's decent at 2, where these other ones are a lot better at 3 and 4. Accuracies looks at average recoil. The MTZ is not as good, and that can be a flaw again if you don't have as good of recoil control. Also, hit scan range. This is how many meters you have till after this until you have to start leading your shot. So Taq Eradicator, great bullet velocity up to 67 meters. You don't have to lead your shots at all, basically. And then we're going to keep scrolling down here we're going to hit the show advanced detail so we can look at a ton of different stats here. I'm going to move my webcam up here to the top, voila, and that way it's hopefully not blocking too much here. I'm not going to go in crazy here and all the detail here to bore you guys, but here's kind of my quick summary in case you kind of skip through this and you just want like, what should I pick? MTZ-556 is probably the best overall. That's what I would also go with ranked. As long as you have decent recoil control, it's going to be the best. If you don't have good recoil control, SVA-545 is the next best. As long as you're okay with shooting it on burst, you can aim and burst it at the same time. If you want something big damage per mag, great bullet velocity, pretty good recoil, Taq Eradicator will also be a very solid option. If you're playing solos, BP50, nothing beats it. It's just the damage per mag is really, really bad. DG58, still very good. Nothing wrong with it if you've got it leveled up. And then the Holger 26, kind of more of an honorable mention. Low recoil, about similar to the DG, but the Holger will have some better TTKs. Now, I know about half of you just skipped from the beginning all the way to here. So if you did, you owe me a like. Go like the video, maybe comment as well, you know, do all the nice things to help the video do well in the algorithm and whatnot. But anyways, starting at number 6, this is going to be an honorable mention here really, is the DG58. It's still pretty good, not as good as it used to be, but I really quickly want to explain a very important change in how I'm building my long range guns. Most people always put the Bruen heavy support grip, and I used to be like this too. Helps our recoil. They nerfed it a while back to where now it actually hurts our vertical recoil some, and it gives us this big penalty to our ADS speed. Well, almost every gun has a rear grip that does a lot of recoil control here. So for this one, it's the Varanus. If we look at it, this is actually a much better overall recoil control buff compared to the Bruen, and no penalty to our handling. And to make this even better, this is giving us +2 to our firing aim stability, which is a very important stat that helps smooth the gun out when we're shooting, whereas the Bruen heavy is actually only giving it a +1. Now, the only downside is this is giving us negatives to our aiming idle sway, but aiming idle sway is not that important because it stops as soon as we start shooting. This is just like the bob when you're aiming the gun and you're not shooting. So in general, the recoil rear grip is going to be a much better option than the Bruen heavy support because it's going to give you better recoil for less ADS penalties, which on a Resurgence especially is very, very important. Now for the rest of the DG58 build, I really try to speed mine up so that way it's not slow for Resurgence. So I go Sonic instead of the VT. This also gives us much better bullet velocity than the VT does. High grain for that even more bullet velocity than Woody long barrel and the recoil rear grip. Now this is an iron sight build. This is also on that kind of pay to win fossilized blueprint. If you don't have this, you don't like the iron sights, not a big deal. Just take off high grain, put on something like the Jack Glassless or maybe the Choreo Eagle Eye. And this build is still phenomenal even without high grain. Coming in at number 5, we have the Holger 26 LMG. Again, it's very good, especially on big map, but on Resurgence, I don't think it is quite kind of S tier meta. You will again see I'm not using that Bruen heavy. I'm instead using the more 20 grip, which is the recoil rear grip. I'm also using again the Sonic instead of the VT, and that is so that we can really speed up the handling. Because if not, if we use the VT and the Bruen heavy, the handling is just way too slow. This is an iron sight build. If you don't like the irons, which they're really not too bad on this gun, I don't mind them at all, but if you don't, no worries, just take off high grain, put on the Jack Glassless or maybe the Choreo Eagle Eye. This build will still have a very solid bullet velocity. If this is still too much recoil for you, you could also go super low recoil and go Cassis Break instead. Very, very low recoil, easy to use, but the bullet velocity, it's okay. And for Resurgence, it's probably fine. All right, coming in at number 4, we have the Taq Eradicator. Very, very underrated option right now. Again, this is an iron sight build, but again, if you don't like the irons, not a big deal. Just swap the high grain for something like the Jack Glassless and you're good to go. Again, we're using that recoil rear grip instead of that Bruen heavy support. If you want an even lower recoil build, swap the Spearfire for the Cassis Break. This still has insanely good bullet velocity of almost 1100. That's why the Taq Eradicator is so underrated. And I mean, if you're running it with the Sonic and with high grain, this gives us a ridiculous bullet velocity of 1400. This thing is hit scan up to incredibly long ranges, which is why this gun is so good. All right, coming in at number 3, we have the BP50. If you are a solos player or even for ranked play as well, BP50 is just so good, but that damage per mag is really bad with a 45 round mag, fast shooting, and a slow reload. Again, this is an iron sight build. The iron sights, they're not bad at all on this one. I think they're pretty clean. Especially when it comes to Resurgence. But again, if you don't like them, not a big deal. I am running high velocity instead of high grain. High velocity was actually scoring a little bit higher on the GG's algorithm for us, but you could totally run high grain instead. But just take that off, put on the Jack Glassless, you're good to go. Again, running that recoil rear grip instead of the Bruen heavy. Even with this setup, still got a very solid bullet velocity. If you want even lower recoil, again, swap that Spearfire for the Cassis, and you still pretty decent bullet velocity at just shy of 900. And coming in at number 2, we have the SVA 545, specifically in the burst mode. So in case you're new here and you haven't seen me talk about this, this is full auto. This is me not controlling the recoil. It goes, I mean, it definitely has recoil, but if we reload this bad boy and we switch it to semi-auto, this is burst mode. It has literally no recoil as long as you have a good trigger finger. Now, for the rest of this build, this gun has no recoil, so we don't need to worry about a recoil rear grip or a Bruen heavy. Don't need to run the VT7 Spearfire. We're gonna go Sonic in the precision barrel to get as much bullet velocity as possible. High grain, more bullet velocity in range, 60 round mag, and then the Jack Glassless optic. Although you definitely could take off the Jack Glassless and run iron sights, and then you could definitely run the recoil rear grip because it's gonna give you that firing aim stability if you wanted to, but I think you're probably better just to run an optic. And coming in at number 1, the MTZ556. Again, if you have decent recoil control, this is probably hands down the best gun to be using right now. This is the ultra low recoil iron sight build with the Cassis Break, that recoil rear grip, and the MTZ Marauder stock, which all of these help recoil. When it comes to the barrel, a lot of people are always asking me, why do you run the clinch and not the drifter heavy? The clinch gives us a better bullet velocity than the drifter, and bullet velocity just, I think, is a very important stat. Also, yes, the drifter gives you a little bit more range, but it's so minimal, and extra recoil is just so minimal. I think the clinch is just better because of that bullet velocity. Now, if you don't like the iron sights, no big deal. Take off the recoil rear grip here, put on the Jack Glassless. I was running this build earlier today and absolutely love the feel of this build. One other option you can do as well, if you have really good recoil control, you want really good bullet velocity, you could definitely go a VT7 Spearfire, take that bad boy off, put this back on. This one is very good, a little bit wobbly. One other option I will suggest as well that I was running is go back to the Cassis, and then if you're okay with the iron sights, put on high grain. This build is going to give us pretty low recoil and much better bullet velocity at about 1,000 here. So this build, if you have decent recoil control, I think is probably the best one overall, actually. Alrighty guys, that is gonna wrap things up. Again, I would highly encourage you guys to check out our website, GGs.AI. Whenever there's a gun update, buff or nerf, we are updating the site usually within a few hours at most. Tons of other builds here. Again, I already posted my close range video the other day here. Here's a really quick kind of look at the algorithm though. So if you want to see these builds, go check out the website for yourself. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.